We can see trends now that every NFL team has played at least one game. In week 2 of the season, we're keeping a close eye on one player from each team. This could be because of how it started or because it's something we can expect to see more of in the future. So who would you think are the top players of the week this NFL season week 2? Keep watching and stick with me until the end of the video and let us all find out. The 2022 NFL season starts on Thursday, September 8th, so it's time for our weekly list of the top players in the league. What can we expect from the best players this season, and how do they stack up against each other? Here's the top players list. Let's start with the passing leaders. Tua Tagovailoa of the Miami Dolphins. Tagovailoa is ready to take a big step forward as he starts his third NFL season. During the offseason, Miami worked hard to improve its supporting cast. They added a group that included stars like Tyreek Hill and Teron Armstead. It could be Tagovailoa's big break since he hasn't been much of a fantasy factor so far. As a rookie, he never finished higher than 15th. In 2021, he never finished higher than 11th. So far, he has not taken many risks. Last season, his average throw depth of 7 yards was near the bottom of the league. He hasn't improved much with his legs, but maybe that will change now that Mike McDaniel is running the offense. Tagovailoa is young and his situation has improved, so he is a good choice for a late flyer. Carson Wentz of Washington Commanders. After one season with the Colts, Wentz was sent to Washington in a trade. After having a bad year in 2020 with Philadelphia, he made a big improvement in 2021. However, Wentz still wasn't much of a fantasy factor. He finished 13th, even though he played in all 17 games. The run-heavy offense of Indianapolis has problems with volume, and even if the changes in Washington, it might not be enough to make up for mediocre efficiency and rushing contributions. Wentz will have an excellent offense line and strong supporting players, led by Terry McLaurin. Still, it's unlikely he'll have his third top 12 fantasy season. He is a backup QB2. Justin Herbert of the Philadelphia Eagles. Hurts will return for his second season as the Eagles' starting quarterback. The 2020 second-round pick was outside the top 20 in passing yards and TDs last season, but he's made up for it by placing the position in carries, rushing yards, and rushing touchdowns. The rushing prowess helped him to a healthy 20.0 fantasy PPG, which ranked 7th at the position. Hurts will benefit from an excellent supporting cast with an elite offensive line and standout targets, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert. Hurts remains a work in progress as a passer, which makes his seat hotter than your usual QB1 target. Still, his elite rushing ability supplies him with a top 5 fantasy upside. Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. Jackson is an interesting wildcard because his production has dropped since he won the MVP award in 2019. In 2019, Jackson led his position in fantasy points and scored 43 touchdowns. In 2020, he only scored 33 touchdowns and finished 10th in fantasy points. Last season, Jackson played in 11 full games and scored 18 touchdowns. He missed 5 games due to an injury. The good news is that he got better at fantasy when he was healthy, ranking 5th in fantasy points per game. Jackson is still the best runner in his position. He has finished first or second in carries and rushing yards in his 4th seasons as a starter. Marquise Brown was the team's best receiver, so losing him hurts, but Jackson is still in his prime and a mid-range QB1 with an elite upside. Rushing leaders. Aaron Jones of Green Bay Packers. Jones is entering his 6th season with the Packers. While he remains the lead back, he'll continue to face substantial competition from third-year A.J. Dillon. Excluding the 2 games Jones missed last season, Jones had 183 carries and 75 targets, compared to 169 carries and 30 targets for A.J. Dillon. Jones finished as a top 12 fantasy RB for the 3rd year in a row. Though his rushing production was down considerably, durability is a concern here as Jones has missed at least 2 regular season games during 4 of his 5 NFL campaigns. Jones will at least split the carries and is heavily involved in the passing game in one of the league's top offenses. So even with some concerns, the 27-year-old remains a fringe RB1. David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears. Montgomery is going into his 4th season as Chicago's starting running back. The 2019 third-round pick missed 4 games last season, but he still finished 7th in snaps, 9th in carries, and 16th in receptions among backs. After a disappointing first season, Montgomery has been much better the last 2 years, and his playing time has gone up to match. He's always busy near the goal line. Since David joined the league, Montgomery ranks 5th with 36 carries inside the 5-yard line. Montgomery has finished in the top 15 in fantasy points per game in the last 2 years, and he's likely to be used similarly in 2022. The 25-year-old is a solid RB2 with the potential to become a back-end RB1. Christian McCaffrey of the Carolina Panthers. McCaffrey hopes to have a better season than the last two, both ruined by injuries. McCaffrey didn't miss a single game in his first 3 NFL seasons and played 85% of the snaps. However, he has only been able to play in 10 games over the last 2 seasons. The good news is that McCaffrey is still very productive, even though Christian is only 26 years old. McCaffrey was a top 15 fantasy RB in all 5 full games he played in 2021, except for the 2 games he had to leave because he was hurt. Even though Christian missed more than half the season, McCaffrey had the 15th most receiving yards among RBs. McCaffrey is still Carolina's main running back, and he could get 200 carries and 90 catches or more. Durability is an obvious concern, but McCaffrey's top production per game makes it hard to pass him up in the top 5 of 2022 fantasy drafts. Receiving leaders. Tyreek Hill of the Miami Dolphins. After finishing 4 of his 6 seasons in Kansas City as a top 8 fantasy wide receiver, Hill was sent to Miami. He just finished a strange season in which defensive changes led to more short area work and a drop in scoring, but he also had a career high of 160 targets and 111 catches. His fantasy performance went up and down with 5 weeks in the top 10 and 8 weeks in the bottom 40. Hill is now 28 years old and his value has decreased since Tua Tagovailoa replaced Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. Still, he's one of the league's most explosive and used players. He's a WR1 in the middle. Jalen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins. Wide receivers are picked early in the first round as rookies tend to have a lot of early success, and Waddle is no different. In his first season, the 6th overall pick in 2021 didn't finish lower than 10th at his position regarding targets, receptions, and catch rates. Waddle's upside was slightly limited by a short area role and the fact that he didn't work on the goal line, but he still did well enough to finish 14th. Waddle seems to be the real deal, but with Tyreek Hill joining the team in 2022, it might be hard for him to make a big step forward. Coach Mike McDaniel will use Waddle a lot, but unless Tua Tagovailoa improves, the 23-year-old is best thought of as a good WR2. Stefon Diggs of Buffalo Bills. Diggs had a career year in 2020, but he slipped a little bit last season. He was still great, finishing no lower than 8th among wide receivers in snaps, targets, receptions, yards, touchdowns, and fantasy points. Stefon had 20 targets in the end zone, which was the most of any player in the league by 5. Diggs' efficiency took a huge drop, but that was more than made up for by the huge number of passes he made in a high-scoring offense that relied heavily on passes. Diggs signed a long-term deal during the offseason, making him Allen's top target for years. The 28-year-old is still a very good WR1. It's never too soon to start thinking about the future, so we're keeping an eye on who's next and who you should remember for the 2023 NFL Draft by highlighting 5 college football players each week. Let me know your thoughts and comment down below.